Well, Mr. Li, China has established already multiple free trade zones. Now it's proposing these free trade ports. What's the difference?
Basically, you need to understand before we really talk about the difference, the purpose of developing, the so-called free trade zone, which can be called, in other countries, for example, also as free trade zone, foreign trade zone, export processing zone, and so on and so forth. And different zones have different purposes. And some of the zones, are designed to, for example, to test, experiment, or drive, certain reform areas to see how it is going to work, whether it is going to be able to, can be replicated or not. But, free trade ports specifically are different because, its location normally, is located in coastal area.
By ports.
Yes, in a port city. And secondly, I think the function, as I said, is different. In other free trade areas, mostly, there are kind of a different type of regulatory, for example, reforms. And in China, I think in those free trade pilot zones are efforts to test different kinds of reform measures. Basically, liberalizing, for example, some of the government regulations to provide a better operating environment. But in this free trade zone, basically it is going to be related to the import and export of commodities. And yes.
Why commodities? I mean, China said that you would start with commodities such as oil. Why?
Yeah, because in those ports, if there's a kind of area designated for the flow, for the free incoming and outgoing of commodities, this will really,
without paying tariffs, without going through
outside
the customs,
outside the customer surveillance, and then these goods and products can be coming to for example, a location that is close or close to the biggest market, or has the cost advantage. It could be as a kind of a center for concentration of commodities for future distribution, or it can be a center, for example, outside the customer surveillance, to be further processed, packaged, and so on. So what this will provide actually facilitation, cost advantages, and so on, so that companies can be more agile and can be more flexible, in those areas. And this is also the representation of the host country's open policy. Okay, if a country would build such a kind of many of those ports, it means this country is ready to, for example, to become, for example, more associated with the commodity markets, and some of which may not be consumed by the country, but they can be regarded as a kind of a regional or sub-regional distribution center. Yes, yeah. Hubs. Right.
Right.
Exactly.
What about Tesla? I mean, there's been reported that Tesla may consider building a factory in one of those areas. What benefit can it get?
Oh yeah, this is also another, in the context of China, if free trade ports are being established, they also assume the responsibility of testing this kind of the different kind of reforms. In Shanghai, in particular, this free trade ports in Shanghai is going to take over all of the reform measures being implemented, in the Shanghai Free Trade Pilot Zone. So in which case, if Tesla, for example, they have been struggling with the idea whether they are going to set up a factory in China, and then they will consider the trade-off, for example, whether they can set up a wholly owned, or they will have to work with a local partner. But with this free trade port, one thing is almost for sure, that they can do a wholly owned, okay, and this is really the main driver of coming to Shanghai.
It's just easier for them. Yeah.
It is easier to get around some of the policy constraints or regulatory constraints.
Great.
Yeah.
So very encouraging for foreign investments, either in commodities
Yeah,
or
exactly. But probably in the future, this kind of experience can be expanded into the other areas of the country, even the whole of China.
Great. Look forward to see progress in this. Thank you so much, Mr. Li.